French President Nicolas Sarkozy is in Washington today for his first official visit to the United States. The two countries have had, well, a frosty relationship ever since France opposed the U.S.-led war in Iraq in 2003. But with Sarkozy's support of the U.S. hardline against Iran's nuclear ambitions, relations between the two countries have started to thaw. Our Washington correspondent, Henry Champ, joins me now with more on the visit. Henry, set the stage here for us, if you can. Is it fair to say relationship has been frosty?
It has been frosty. There's no question about that. Remember freedom fries instead of French fries? And the ban on French cheese, French wine, all that sort of thing. Self-imposed ban. A lot of my friends didn't go along with it. But the fact of the matter is, Jacques Chirac was easily one of the most unpopular world leaders here in Washington, no question of that. And there was a suspicion that he enjoyed taking the mickey out of Washington whenever he could. It's totally different here. In fact, the French press calls their president Sarko the American. And there's no question when you look at him and hear his pronouncements, he says things quite openly, like, I love America. And you recall when he was a candidate, not yet elected, but a candidate, he visited in Kennebunkport, and George Bush shook his hand, and there were smiling pictures, all of which many people said had a big influence in the French election. So these men go back. There's just no question that they are determined, even though there still are differences, they are determined to be good friends and bury some of that chilliness that existed between their two countries.
Well, sure, he even had his vacation this summer in August. Of course, I was in France for a little bit in August, and the people were amazed that a French president would actually go to the United States to have his vacation. It just seemed unbelievable to the French that he would take this step. Now, how do you go past the, gee, they're getting along better and they look like buddies, to actually making a difference in policy? I mean, France obviously has an awful lot to offer or even you could suggest in Afghanistan, where a lot of NATO countries have been saying, you know, we could really use some French presence there. Is there going to be some real things on the table here?
I don't think so. All the impressions that we get talking to the French embassy, talking to the advance team, talking to the people at the White House, it is not likely that there's going to be anything profound. And you're quite right about one thing. You know, we talk about this warm, fuzzy friendship between the two men and the two countries. But when you look at the current foreign policy list, I mean, Sarkozy said that the war in Iraq was a terrible mistake. He was asked recently about Americans declaring war on Iran. He said that would be a catastrophe. He's still complaining about the differences and disparity between the euro and the U.S. dollar, which he blames principally on the United States. All of these things, there still are these irritants. But what the two men seem to have done, and I suspect it's going to be helpful to both countries, is let's accentuate the positive. Remember that old song? Well, that's what they do. You know, I mean, he says, I think Iran war was a big mistake, but we French will participate in the reconstruction when the fighting is over. And that kind of amelioration, that accentuating the positive, playing down the differences, playing up the agreements, seems to be working. That,
of course, song was featured in a movie, Henry, and it's interesting to point out that while I was in France this summer, all the write-ups were saying that the biggest breakthrough in French-American relationships in the last 60 years was the movie Ratatouille that came out. So perhaps that just gives you a sign as to where that relationship actually stands right now. Let's look at it from the French side of this, though, if we can, because we should point out that Sarkozy is trying to accomplish things in France that others before him have tried and failed. And these are some American-style reforms. It'd be interesting to see if he makes any breakthrough on that front, particularly in terms of business and unions.
Well, you know, you would have thought that he would be unable to do it, because you're quite right. Many, many potential leaders and leaders of France have tried to do something to break the logjam of the union control, to do something about what anybody I think with fair conscience would say is a bloated social service. Also a bloated Social Security program, that farmers are kept, for example, on the farms with overwhelming and unwieldy subsidies, things of that kind. But he's trying, and he does seem to be able to make some ground on this. Keep in mind, he ran on a program very openly and directly about trying to develop American entrepreneurship, trying to develop American work ethic within France. There was no secret to what he was doing, and he got elected fairly easily.
It'll be interesting to see in what way, if at all, he benefits from a closer relationship with the United States. This is an interesting thing to watch. Henry, as always, thanks for your insights.
Well, there's a lot of people saying Vive la France today in Washington.
Now that's a change in itself. Thanks, Henry.